I never in a million years imagined my life would come apart like this. It started as just another ordinary day, one of those you barely remember. I was sprawled on the couch, mindlessly flipping through channels, when a sudden, sharp sound jolted me out of my daze, the distinct slam of a car door. At first I brushed it off, assuming it was just another noise from the neighbor's driveway, nothing out of the ordinary. But something about it gnawed at me, an uneasy feeling I couldn't quite shake. Glancing up, I saw her, Lauren, my wife, stepping through the door with a man I didn't recognize. I didn't know his face, but his presence spoke volumes. Confidence radiated off him, from the way he carried himself to the cocky sway in his stride. Tight jeans, self-assured smirk. He was younger than me, that much was obvious. And I didn't need an introduction to figure out who he was or, worse, what he meant. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. For weeks, maybe months, I had ignored the warning signs. The late nights, the sudden shifts in her mood, the way her voice lost its warmth whenever she spoke to me. It had all been there, staring me in the face. But seeing her now, standing beside him, laughing like everything we built meant nothing? That was different. That was real. Her laugh, God, her laugh. It used to be warm, genuine, the kind that felt like sunshine breaking through a cloudy day. But now it was something else entirely, teasing, flirtatious, like it belonged to someone I no longer knew. As they talked, her smile was so bright it almost hurt to look at. And the worst part? It wasn't for me. It hadn't been for a long time. The realization hit me like a gut punch, a cold weight settling in my chest. My heart pounded as I pushed myself to my feet, my body trembling, whether from shock, anger, or both, I couldn't tell. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, to force her to acknowledge me. But I stood there frozen, watching them as if I were invisible. The guy barely spared me a glance, and when he did, his expression was dismissive, like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Lauren didn't even look my way. She was too busy chatting with him, probably about something meaningless, something they'd both forget by tomorrow. But the way she leaned in, the way she laughed, it twisted my stomach into knots. I was a ghost in my own home. When I heard the sound of her heels clicking toward the bedroom, instinct told me to follow her, to confront her right then and there. But I held myself back. I needed answers, not a shouting match. Still, how could I demand the truth when I was drowning in a sea of lies? Had our life together ever been real, or had I just been too blind to see it unraveling? After the guy left, the next few hours crawled by like an eternity. I couldn't sit still. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smirk on her face, heard that laugh, like I didn't even exist. My mind raced, conjuring up worst-case scenarios, each more unbearable than the last. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This betrayal wasn't new. It had been festering beneath the surface for far longer than I had let myself admit. I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes, even if it destroyed me. So, I made up my mind. I went through her things, her phone, her laptop, her emails, searching for anything that might confirm what my gut already knew. And it didn't take long. Hidden in a password-protected folder on her phone were the messages. I had been dreading what I'd find in those messages, but nothing could have prepared me for the gut-wrenching blow they delivered. Each word hit like a sucker punch, cutting deeper than the last, explicit, raw, and painfully intimate. These weren't just casual exchanges. They were filled with thoughts and desires she had never shared with me, things I didn't even know she wanted. My stomach twisted as I forced myself to keep reading, unable to look away but desperate to erase every damning detail from my mind. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the realization they carried. The life I thought we had? It was nothing more than a well-constructed lie. My hands trembled as I scrolled through message after message, each revelation adding more weight to the crushing truth. They had been meeting in secret for weeks, maybe even longer. All those late nights at work, the so-called girls' nights, the endless excuses, they all clicked into place now. My mind raced back to every moment she had looked me in the eye and lied without hesitation. The trust one had held on to so tightly shattered in an instant, and the betrayal hit me like a freight train. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her phone as if it might somehow justify itself, as if there was any explanation that could make sense of this. How could she do this? How could she so carelessly destroy everything we had built together? But amid the chaos of emotions swirling inside me, one thought rose above all the others. I needed answers. I heard her footsteps before I saw her, calm, steady, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She walked into the room as if nothing had happened, wearing the same casual demeanor she'd had all day. But I couldn't keep it in any longer. The moment she stepped through the door, I was on my feet, her phone clutched tightly in my hand. "What the hell is this, Lauren?" My voice was cold, laced with barely restrained fury. For a split second, her eyes widened, surprise flashing across her face before she quickly smothered it with a sugary smile. "What's wrong, babe?" she asked, her tone light, feigning innocence. "Why are you acting so dramatic?" "Dramatic?" My temper flared. "Dramatic?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think I'm overreacting when you're sneaking around with some guy behind my back?" The color drained from her face, and for the briefest moment, I saw it, guilt. But just as quickly she shoved it aside, rolling her eyes with an exasperated shake of her head. "Oh, come on! Not this again. You're being ridiculous." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh, one that didn't even sound like me. "Ridiculous?" My voice cracked, raw with disbelief. "You've been lying to me, Lauren. For how long? How long has this been going on?" She sighed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "It's not what you think," she muttered defensively. I scoffed. "Really? Because the messages I just found sure as hell don't support that." I took a step closer, gripping the phone like it was the only thing keeping me steady. "You've been seeing him for months, haven't you?" Her eyes finally met mine, and that's when I saw it, the smirk. That smug, infuriating smirk I once found charming now felt like a slap in the face. "You don't understand," she said coldly. "I'm not happy, okay? I haven't been happy for a long time. You've been so focused on your career, so busy with your own life, you didn't even notice me slipping away. I needed someone else. Someone who actually sees me." Each word was a dagger, cutting deeper than the last. "So this is my fault?" I could barely force the words out, my throat tight with disbelief. "You're blaming me for your affair?" She shrugged, her expression eerily casual, as if we were discussing something trivial. "Maybe. Maybe not. But I'm not sorry. You didn't care enough, and he did. So yeah, I found what I needed somewhere else." My fists clenched at my sides, my whole body shaking with rage. "You're unbelievable," I growled. "You really think it's that easy? That you can just throw everything away like it meant nothing?" She rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly? I don't owe you an explanation. I've already made my choice. If you can't handle it, then leave. But don't stand there acting like some innocent victim when you've ignored me for years." Her words hit harder than I expected, sharper than any knife. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. The cold indifference, the complete lack of remorse. It was like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had once vowed to spend my life with? She wasn't here anymore. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, someone I wasn't even sure I wanted to know. I wanted to scream, to unleash all the rage burning inside me, but beneath the anger, something colder started creeping in, a hollow emptiness, like the first crack in a dam ready to burst. I could have turned and walked away right then. I could have told her it was over, packed my bags, and left her standing there in her smug, detached indifference. But I didn't. Because as much as I hated it, as much as the betrayal burned through me like acid, I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating, though it probably only lasted seconds. My chest felt tight, my heart hammering as if it was working overtime just to keep me standing. I stared at her, this woman I had once loved, standing in front of me like she didn't even know me. She didn't flinch. Her expression remained blank, her posture radiating defiance. It was like trying to argue with a stone. "You're really just going to stand there and act like I'm the one who ruined everything?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, thick with frustration and disbelief. She shrugged again, that same infuriating, careless gesture that made my blood boil. "I'm not saying you ruined everything," she said, her tone unnervingly indifferent. "I'm just saying you weren't there when I needed you. She crossed her arms, tilting her head slightly, like she was the reasonable one in all this. Maybe I would have stayed loyal if you'd actually paid attention. But honestly, I was suffocating. I needed someone who made me feel alive. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow. Alive? My voice was sharp, almost disbelieving. That's what this is about. Feeling alive? You destroyed everything we had for that. She didn't even blink. Instead, another shrug, that same faint, smug smile tugging at her lips. You make it sound like I committed some unforgivable crime, she said, her voice calm, almost amused. But I haven't. I'm just taking care of myself for once. I spent years taking care of you, this house, everything. And where did it get me? Stuck in a loveless marriage, feeling alone. I'm done pretending. Her words landed like blows, each one harder than the last. But what cut the deepest wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the way she spoke about it. Like it was nothing. Like we were discussing a bad restaurant or a rainy day. There was no regret. No shame. Just cold detachment. For a split second, I felt like I might lose control. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to demand she explain herself, to beg her to take it all back. But as I stood there, another realization settled over me, painful and inescapable. I didn't want her apology. I didn't want her empty excuses. I already had the truth. And somehow, that made it even worse. Do you even care about me anymore? Do you even care about me anymore? My voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. It was a fragile question, one that felt like the last thread keeping me tethered to what we had. For the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes, hesitation, maybe even guilt. But just as quickly, she looked away, her expression hardening again. You're still stuck on that, huh? She said, her tone cold, almost dismissive. Of course I care about you. But caring? It's not enough. It never was. You were too busy, with your job, your friends, your life outside of us. I was just a side note. I needed more. Someone who was actually there. I wanted to yell at her, to throw every sacrifice I had made right back in her face. I wanted to tell her how wrong she was, how much it hurt to hear her twist everything into something so hollow. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wouldn't matter. Not to her. She had already made her choice. And then, she did something I didn't expect. She stepped closer, closing the space between us, her eyes narrowing like she was sizing me up. Without thinking, I took a step back, recoiling instinctively. This entire conversation had felt like a twisted game, a battle for control. But now it was something else. It was like she was searching for something, not forgiveness, not regret. Something darker. Almost like she was daring me to react. You're angry, she murmured, her voice low, disturbingly calm, tinged with amusement. I can see it in your eyes. But you won't do anything. You never do. She tilted her head, studying me, her lips curling into something just shy of a smirk. You'll just stand there and let me talk. Let me say what I've been holding in for years. And you'll take it. Just like you always do. Her words were a jab, sharp, deliberate. She took another step closer, her voice dropping even lower. You've always been passive. Never demanding, never standing up for yourself. Maybe that's why I couldn't stay. She paused, letting it sink in before delivering the final blow. Maybe that's why I ended up in his bed instead of yours. The words cut straight through me, deeper than I thought possible. She knew exactly where to strike, how to hurt me in ways no one else could. And the worst part? There was some truth in it. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who stayed calm, who made sure everyone else was happy. I had built my life around being the good guy. But in trying so hard to keep the peace, I had lost myself. And I had lost her. I can't do this, I muttered, my voice barely making it past my lips. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with any of this. Her expression flickered with something. Satisfaction? Amusement? I couldn't tell. Whatever it wasn't remorse. Then don't, she said simply. I'm not asking you to. Her words were blunt, emotionless. I've already made my choice. You can either accept it or not. It's that simple. The way she said it, the sheer indifference, made my stomach turn. And then, her face shifted. Her lips curled into something cruel, almost mocking, as she took a step back. "But don't think for a second you're going to guilt-trip me into feeling bad for living my life," she scoffed, shaking her head. "I'm done." The finality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there, frozen, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. "You're done?" I finally asked, my voice barely steady. It came out broken, cracking under the weight of disbelief. She met my eyes, cold, empty. "Yeah," she said, her voice as lifeless as the look on her face. "Just like that." And then she walked past me. No hesitation. No pause. It was like I wasn't even there. Just another piece of furniture in her way. I turned to watch her leave, unable to move, unable to speak. The door slammed behind her, the sound ringing through the house with a finality that felt deafening. And just like that, she was gone. The silence that followed wasn't the peaceful kind. It was heavy, oppressive, filled with everything unsaid and undone. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of what had just happened settled over me like a crushing weight. The woman I loved. The life I thought we had. Gone, shattered in an instant. I wanted to scream. To break something. To do anything that might release the storm building inside me. But I didn't. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a numb, hollow void where everything else had been. My hands hung uselessly at my sides as the weight of it all bore down on me. I tried to breathe, but even the air in the room felt thick and suffocating. The house, our home, felt different now. Smaller. Darker. Like the walls were closing in. And still, in the back of my mind, I could hear the echo of that door slamming behind her. Like a gunshot. Like the final, resounding proof that my entire world had just crumbled, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The anger. The hurt. The disbelief. It all swirled together, tangled into something I couldn't even name. I stood motionless for what felt like hours, lost in the crushing realization that she wasn't coming back. And neither was the life I thought I had. The cold night air bit at my skin as I stepped outside, but it did nothing to clear my mind. My thoughts kept spiraling, pulling me deeper into a darkness I couldn't escape. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was dragging the weight of my shattered life behind me. The street was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that only made the noise in my head louder. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to get away from the suffocating stillness of the house that no longer felt like home. My footsteps echoed against the pavement, a stark reminder that I was alone. Truly, utterly alone. Lauren's words played on a relentless loop in my mind. I needed someone who could make me feel alive. That phrase hit harder with every repetition, like a hammer driving a nail deeper into my heart. How had I missed the signs? The late nights. The excuses? The distance? I had chalked it all up to stress, to life's inevitable ups and downs. But now, it was clear. I had been blind. Willfully blind. Shame clawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. I had always prided myself on being steady. Dependable. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her space, trusting her. But now I questioned everything. Had I been too focused on work? Had I not shown her enough affection? Had I been boring? The doubts fed on my pain, growing stronger with every question I couldn't answer. I stopped walking, leaning against the street lamp, my breath visible in the freezing air. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. But the memories came rushing in. Our first date, when she wore that blue dress and couldn't stop laughing at my terrible jokes. The way she smiled at me on our wedding day like I was her whole world. I could still see it so clearly, that look in her eyes, the warmth in her touch. The nights we stayed up talking about the future, dreaming about the life we would build together. And now, standing here in the cold, it all felt like a lie. I tilted my head back, staring up at the sky. The stars were faint, barely visible against the city lights, but they were there, distant and untouchable. A cruel reminder of just how small I felt in this moment. How insignificant my pain was in the grand scheme of things. My marriage, my heartbreak, it meant nothing to the universe. But to me? It was everything. I let out a shaky breath, my chest tightening with the effort. I couldn't stay like this, couldn't keep drowning in my own thoughts. I needed to do something, to take action, to reclaim even a sliver of control. But what? What the hell was left to do when the foundation of my life had crumbled beneath me? For the first time in what felt like hours, I allowed myself to really feel the anger, not just at Lauren, but at myself. For trusting too much. For ignoring the signs. For believing that love alone was enough to fix everything. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was humiliation. Betrayal. A loss so profound, I wasn't sure I'd ever recover. But I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't go back to that house. Not tonight. Not to those memories. I started walking again, faster this time, my footsteps hitting the pavement with newfound purpose. I had no destination in mind, I just needed to move, to keep going. Because if I stopped, even for a moment, I was afraid I might never start again. I wandered aimlessly, letting my legs carry me wherever they chose. My thoughts kept circling back to Lauren, to the way her face looked as she walked away. No regret. No hesitation. Just cold indifference. She had made her decision. And she wasn't looking back. The realization hit me like a brick. The woman I loved, the one I thought I knew better than anyone, had already let me go. At some point, I found myself standing outside a bar. I wasn't sure why I had ended up there, but the flickering neon sign above the door felt almost mocking. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of everything crashing down on me. Lauren was probably with him somewhere, laughing, moving on, like I was nothing more than a fading memory. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through me, and before I could talk myself out of it, I pushed through the door. I went straight to the counter and ordered the strongest drink they had. I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to think. The bartender gave me a long, questioning look, but I ignored it. I was there to drown out the chaos in my head. The first sip burned its way down my throat, but the ache in my chest didn't budge. So I drank again. And again. The haze of alcohol settled in, numbing the edges of my thoughts, but it couldn't touch the emptiness that had rooted itself deep inside me. By the time I stumbled back out into the night, I felt like a shadow of myself. A hollow shell of the man I used to be. No direction. No plan. Everything I thought I knew had been turned upside down, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. Could I ever forgive her? Could I forget the way she betrayed me? The answer hit me harder than the alcohol ever could. No. There was no coming back from this. No apology would ever mend what was broken. But even as I stood there, grappling with the wreckage, a small sliver of hope refused to die. Was there a way forward? A way to rebuild, even after everything? Because as much as it hurt, as much as her actions had shattered me, I couldn't shake the truth. I had loved her. Some part of me still did. Even if I hated myself for it. The walk home was quiet, but the silence felt heavy, pressing down on me with every step. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, if there even was a tomorrow for us. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was gone, and there was no bringing it back. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of numbness and raw, aching pain. I couldn't tell you what I did most of the time. The hours dragged on without purpose, and the only thing I knew for sure was that I was a mess. Work became my escape, a way to distract myself from the crushing weight of everything that had happened. But even there, my thoughts betrayed me, drifting back to the empty house, to the life that had unraveled so fast I could barely make sense of it. In the evenings, I'd sit in silence, replaying everything over and over, the look on her face when she admitted the truth, the sound of the door closing behind her. Her words, sharp and unforgiving, lingered in the air like a storm cloud. She was done with me. And no matter how many times I replayed it, it still didn't feel real. I tried to keep myself busy. I took long walks, made half-hearted attempts at cooking, even rearranged furniture, anything to trick myself into believing that changing my surroundings might somehow change how I felt. But it was useless. The truth was always there, waiting for me the moment I stopped moving. It pressed on my chest like a weight, a constant reminder that she was gone. And nothing would bring her back. Every day felt like I was just going through the motions, waiting for something, anything, to pull me out of the darkness. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the light. Then one night, as I sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly picking at a meal I hadn't even wanted to make, my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it, figuring it was just junk mail or some work email that could wait. Then it buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. And froze. Lauren. Her name stared back at me, sending a jolt through my chest. I hadn't seen her name, let alone her face, since that night. I had convinced myself I was better off without her, that I didn't need closure, didn't need to hear anything she had to say. But the sight of her name alone stirred something deep inside me. Something dark. Something I hated acknowledging. Before I could stop myself, I unlocked my phone and read the message. Just 3 words. Can we talk? It wasn't much, but those words carried the weight of everything I had been running from. A storm of emotions hit me at once, anger, confusion, and, to my own disgust, a flicker of hope. Hope for what? That she'd apologize? That she'd beg for another chance? A part of me, one I didn't want to admit existed, almost craved that. I wanted to see her grovel, to hear her plead for my forgiveness, even though I knew I'd never trust her again. But I also couldn't lie to myself. I wanted answers. My hand shook as I exhaled sharply, my fingers hovering over the screen before I finally typed out a reply. What do you want, Lauren? Her response came almost instantly. I made a mistake. I was stupid. I know you're angry, I know I hurt you, but I need to explain. Please. I set the phone down like it had burned me. My chest tightened, my heart hammering like it was trying to break free. What the hell was I supposed to do with that? After everything she'd done, how could she just waltz back into my life and expect me to listen? The audacity made my blood boil. She didn't care about what I was feeling. She never had. I knew she wasn't sorry, not really. Yet despite everything, some part of me still wanted to hear her admit it. To have her lay it all out in the open, to say the words I knew deep down she never would. I walked over to the window, staring out at the quiet street below. Everything out there looked normal, peaceful, even. Completely unaffected by the storm raging inside me. That contrast made me feel isolated, like I was trapped in some alternate reality no one else could see. As I stood there, something inside me shifted. It wasn't the familiar anger or heartbreak I'd grown used to carrying. It was something sharper. Clearer. A kind of icy realization. I couldn't go back. Not now. Not ever. What she'd done wasn't just a betrayal, it was disgusting. The lies. The deceit. The way she had so easily thrown away everything we'd built for a fleeting thrill, for someone else. I wasn't a fool anymore. And I wasn't going to let her drag me back into that mess of selfishness and manipulation. But even with that clarity, I couldn't stop the ache for the woman I thought she was. The woman I had loved so deeply. I took a slow, steady breath and typed my reply, making sure there was no room for doubt. It's over, Lauren. You made your choice, and I'm not going to let you mess with my head again. You don't get to come back and act like nothing happened. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The hours that followed were a blur. I kept my phone within arm's reach, half expecting a flood of texts or calls, something dramatic, maybe even desperate. But there was nothing. Just silence. The silence was unbearable, pressing in on me like a suffocating weight. Yet, at the same time, I felt something unexpected. Relief. A strange contradiction, like I'd finally cut the last thread tying me to her. But now I was free-floating, unmoored, unsure of where to go next. The constant weight on my chest, the one I had carried for so long, was gone. But in its place was something just as heavy. Loneliness. It wasn't just Lauren's absence that haunted me. It was the future we had planned, the life I thought we would share. The house that had once been filled with warmth, laughter, and love now felt cold and hollow, like a tomb filled with echoes of memories I couldn't escape. As the hours crawled by, I came to a painful realization. There wasn't going to be any closure. Not from her. And maybe not even from within myself. Life wasn't a storybook. There wouldn't be a clean ending, no perfect resolution tied up with a bow. If I wanted to move forward, I would have to figure it out on my own. The weeks that followed were slow, messy, and painfully uncertain. But I started to rebuild. Piece by fragile piece. I took a step I had been avoiding for years. I found a therapist. Sitting in that office, untangling the mess of emotions that had no clear beginning or end, was terrifying. But it was necessary. I spent more time with my friends, even when I didn't feel fully present, trying to remind myself that the world hadn't stopped turning just because mine had. I carved out time for myself. Signed up for activities that had nothing to do with Lauren or the life we had shared. These things were just for me. Small acts of defiance against the grip of my past. It wasn't easy. Every step forward felt heavy, like dragging a weight behind me. She was still there, lingering in my thoughts, in the quiet moments I couldn't escape. A shadow I couldn't outrun. I wondered, more often than I cared to admit, what might have been. What if she hadn't left? What if she hadn't betrayed me? But day by day, the shattered pieces of my life started forming something new. It wasn't perfect. It sure as hell wasn't the life I had envisioned. But it was mine. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I began to believe I could heal. I didn't need Lauren anymore. I wouldn't let her control my emotions or dictate my future. Still, the days that followed felt like walking a tightrope between my past and my future. One part of me was determined to move forward, to leave the wreckage of our marriage behind. But another part couldn't quite let go. Memories of her, of us, clung to me, stubborn and unyielding. I'd see her smile in my mind, hear her laugh, and suddenly, I was back there. In the good times. In the moments that felt so real, so unbreakable. I kept busy. Threw myself into work, staying late at the office, trying to revive the career I had neglected during my marriage. Took long walks at night. Spent hours at the gym. Even revisited old hobbies I hadn't touched in years. It was all a distraction, a desperate attempt to fill the void, to stitch up the wound that refused to heal. But no matter what I did, the questions gnawed at me. Did I want to forgive her? Or did I want to burn every last connection to her? Some days I was certain the trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. Other days I found myself lost in memories of the life we had built together. The laughter. The dreams. The love I thought would last forever. I hated that I still cared. Hated that I still missed her. I felt stuck in purgatory, unable to move forward, unwilling to go back. And then, one night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't just a text. It was a voicemail. Something about it felt different. Heavier. My gut twisted as I stared at the screen, bracing myself. This was it. The moment of truth. It felt like everything could either come crashing down around me or finally start to piece itself back together. My thumb hovered over the play button. I hesitated. A part of me screamed that listening to this message was a mistake. That it would pull me right back into the chaos I'd fought so hard to escape. But curiosity, and maybe desperation for some kind of closure, won out. So I pressed play. Her voice came through, shaky and fragile, but unmistakably hers. "I know I don't deserve to ask you this, but please, hear me out," she said, her voice breaking on the last word. I could hear the rawness in her tone. The weight she carried. For a fleeting second, something stirred in me. A flicker of hope. But I stamped it out just as quickly. I couldn't afford to let myself believe her again. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued, voice trembling. "I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I can't live with myself knowing I hurt you like this." She inhaled sharply, her breath shaky. "I know I betrayed you. And I regret it every single day." There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of her unsteady breathing. "I don't even recognize who I've become," she admitted. "And I just need you to know, I never wanted to hurt you." Another pause. A longer one. Then, barely above a whisper. "I don't know what came over me. And now, it's too late." A choked breath. "You're gone. And I'm empty without you." Her words hit me like a tidal wave. Relentless. Overwhelming. For a moment I felt something deep inside, a pain I couldn't fully define. Was it pity? Sorrow? Or just the ghost of the love I had once felt for her? She sounded so broken. So sincere. But was it real? Or just another layer to the web of manipulation she had spun before? I had spent so many sleepless nights chasing answers, trying to make sense of what went wrong, clinging to the idea that some version of closure might finally bring me peace. Yet now, as her tearful confession poured from the speaker, something shifted in me. It had been a long time since I'd felt anything real. I had survived the worst of it, I knew that much, and I was sure I could keep pushing forward. But the days that followed weren't at all what I had expected. I thought filing for divorce would feel like a victory, or at the very least, bring some sense of closure. Instead, I found myself stuck in a strange, unsettling limbo. It was like stepping into a version of my life that didn't quite fit yet, like trying to settle into a space I didn't fully recognize. The house, once packed with memories, good and bad, now felt hollow and cold. I had grown used to the silence over the past few months, but this was different. This wasn't the peaceful quiet of solitude. This was the kind of silence that pressed down on you, making you feel small, reminding you just how fragile everything really was. Outside, life moved on as if nothing had changed. People carried on with their routines, going about their lives while I remained stuck in this strange in-between. Too broken to move forward, yet far too shattered to even think about going back. And in the stillness of those days, I was forced to face something I had been avoiding for far too long. I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't Lauren's husband. I wasn't the man I had been before her either. I was someone else now, someone undefined, unfinished. And that terrified me. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe this was my chance to figure it out, to discover who I could be on my own. That didn't mean it was easy. Not even close. There were still moments when memories of her sneaked in, uninvited and unwanted. I'd catch myself remembering her laugh, the way her hand fit in mine, or how she used to curl up next to me on the couch, like just being close was enough. But those memories weren't comforting anymore. They were tainted, shadowed by everything she had done. It wasn't that I didn't miss her. I did, in some ways. But it wasn't really her I missed. It was the life I thought we were going to have. The future we had planned. The dreams we once shared. And that was the hardest part, letting go of the version of us I had built in my head, the one that never actually existed. Because no matter how much I had wanted it to be real, that future was never going to happen. And accepting that? It felt like losing her all over again. But I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the bench like it was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. My heart pounded, anger, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name swirling together. "Lauren," I finally said, my voice colder than I intended. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "I wasn't sure if I'd see you here. I almost didn't come over. Why are you here?" My tone was sharper now. "What do you want?" She looked down, scuffing the gravel with the toe of her shoe. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. Then she looked up, her eyes glistening with something that might have been regret, or maybe it was just another performance. At this point, I couldn't tell anymore. I needed to talk to you," she said softly. "To explain." "Explain?" I let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking my head. "There's nothing left to explain, Lauren. You made your choices. You walked away. And I've been the one left picking up the pieces ever since." "I know," she said quickly, her voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve your time, or your forgiveness. But I can't live with the way we left things. I can't stand the thought of you believing that everything we had was a lie." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For months, that exact thought had haunted me, that maybe everything we'd built had been fake, that I had been too blind to see who she really was. "Wasn't it, though?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "Because the woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, she wouldn't have done what you did. She wouldn't have lied to me. She wouldn't have betrayed me. So tell me, Lauren, what was real? Was any of it real?" Her face crumpled, and she took a hesitant step closer. I leaned back, keeping the distance between us. "It was real," she said, her voice trembling. "All of it was real. At least for me. I know I ruined everything, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I hurt you." I stared at her, searching her face for some trace of truth. But even if she meant every word, it didn't change anything. It didn't undo what had happened. It didn't erase the pain, the nights I had spent questioning everything, wondering what I had done wrong, why I hadn't been enough. You don't get to hate yourself and make this about you, I said, my voice sharper now. You don't get to walk back in here and try to rewrite the story just to make yourself feel better. I've spent months trying to move on, trying to rebuild my life without you. And now you just show up out of nowhere, like you have the right to, what? Clear your conscience? Get some closure? She flinched, and for the briefest moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know I can't fix this. I know I can't fix us. But I had to tell you. I never stopped loving you. Her words hung in the air, knocking the breath from my chest. And for just a second, one painful, fleeting second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let myself feel the love I had buried so deep. But then I remembered. I remembered the endless nights spent alone, the moment I realized she had chosen someone else, the long, agonizing road I had walked just to feel whole again. I stopped loving you the moment you betrayed me, I said quietly but firmly. The words felt heavy, but they were the truth. She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her face. I understand, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I needed you to know. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the distance. I sat there, staring at the empty path where she had just been. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to run after her. I didn't feel the crushing weight of her absence pulling me under. Instead, I felt free. Finally, truly free. And yet there was still a part of me, one I hated, that wanted to give her a chance to speak. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. I just had to see you, she said, her eyes dropping to the ground before hesitantly meeting mine again. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted to apologize. I've been trying to figure everything out. I know I hurt you, and I'll carry that regret for the rest of my life. I never wanted things to end like this. I stared at her, my mind spinning in a dozen different directions. A part of me wanted to listen, to let her explain, to finally hear the apology I once thought I'd never get. But the other part, the part that had spent months painstakingly piecing my life back together, knew better. I couldn't risk falling for her words again. What do you expect from me? I finally asked, my tone cold, unwavering. I can't just erase what you did. I can't forget the lies, the betrayal. You destroyed everything we had. And I won't let you do that to me again. Her face fell, and for a fleeting second, I saw the woman I used to know, the woman I had loved so deeply. The same woman who had shattered me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said softly. I needed to say I'm sorry. I know it won't change anything, but I couldn't go on without telling you that. I sat there, unsure of how to respond. Part of me still craved closure, still wanted her to take full responsibility, to give me something that would prove I hadn't been completely blind. But the truth was, there was no closure to be had. No magical phrase would undo what had been done or make everything right again. I appreciate you saying that, I said finally, my voice steady but distant. But I can't go back. You made your choice, and I've made mine. Standing up, I looked at her one last time, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on me. Goodbye, Lauren, I said, my voice firm, resolute. Then, without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away. The cool breeze swept over me, clearing the fog that had clouded my mind for so long. I didn't need her to fix things. I didn't need her to save me. I had already saved myself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt it. I was free. The night air was crisp, and though the weight of the past still lingered in my chest, I knew I had finally let go. Leaving Lauren behind for good felt like closing a chapter that had drained me for far too long. Still, closure didn't come easily. It wasn't a single moment, but a process, a slow, uphill climb I'd have to keep working at. And as I kept walking, I knew I was finally moving forward the park. The familiar surroundings felt different now, like they were whispering something new, an unspoken promise of a fresh start. The darkening sky stretched endlessly above me, and for a moment, I just stood there, breathing it all in. I didn't feel angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. Instead, there was just emptiness. But it wasn't the kind that left me hollow and broken. No, this was something else. This was the emptiness that came with letting go. Real freedom. And then it hit me, a quiet but startling realization. I didn't need to keep looking back. My future was mine now. There was no point trying to piece together the remains of a marriage that had already crumbled. No reason to chase after apologies or explanations that would never be enough. I had all the time in the world to rediscover who I was, to rebuild my life from the ground up. With that thought, I turned toward the parking lot, a rare sense of peace settling over me. I had made the right choice. But as I got closer to my car, something stopped me in my tracks. A few spaces away, parked under the dim glow of a street lamp, was a car I knew all too well. Lauren's. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I stared at it, my mind racing. What was she still doing here? Hadn't I just walked away from her? Was she sitting there, waiting for me to come back, hoping I'd change my mind? Did she actually believe that pouring her heart out was enough to undo the wreckage we had left behind? I hesitated, frozen for a second as the thought of confronting her again crossed my mind. But then something shifted inside me. No. She didn't deserve another chance. I wasn't the same man who once believed love could conquer all. Life had taught me, painfully, that some choices couldn't be undone, no matter how much you wanted them to be. And I couldn't keep holding on to the hope of fixing something that was beyond repair. Without a second glance, I turned and walked to my car, my resolve firm. But just as I reached for the door handle, I froze. Under the dim streetlight near her car, I saw another figure. A man. Tall. Broad-shouldered. And disturbingly familiar. My stomach twisted into knots as realization hit me like a freight train. It was him. The guy I had seen with her that day. The one she had been sneaking around with. The same man who had shattered the foundation of trust one had spent my entire life building. I don't know what came over me in that moment. Was it anger? Jealousy? Or maybe some desperate, irrational need for answers? Whatever it was, it took over completely. Before I even had a chance to think, my legs were already moving, pulling me toward a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for, but knew I couldn't avoid. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the cold night air. He spun around, startled. For a fleeting second, I caught the look of surprise on his face, like he hadn't expected me to call him out. His hand shot up defensively, like he was bracing himself for whatever was coming. But he didn't say a word. Within seconds, I was standing right in front of him, my fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I'd been holding it in for too long. The betrayal. The lies. The soul-crushing, gut-wrenching hurt. And now, like a tidal wave, it all came rushing to the surface. I couldn't contain it anymore. "Did you really think you could just waltz into my life and destroy everything?" I hissed, my voice thick with venom. "Did you honestly believe it would be that easy? That you could wreck everything I built, and just walk away like nothing happened?" He took a small step back, his eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape route. But there was nowhere to go. "Look, man," he stammered, his voice uneven. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't know. Don't feed me that crap." I cut him off, my words sharp as a blade. "You knew exactly what you were doing. You knew who she was. So don't stand there and act like some clueless bystander. You're just as guilty as she is." He swallowed hard, his discomfort obvious now. "I'm not looking for trouble," he muttered, his voice quieter, like he was trying to de-escalate. "Too late. The trouble's already here." I shot back, my voice low and simmering with rage. "The damage is done. I didn't want to be this person, the guy who lost control, who let his emotions take over. But standing there, face to face with him, all I could feel was the anger boiling over. It wasn't just about him. It was about what I'd lost. The utter disrespect they had both shown me. The life they had ripped apart without a second thought. For a split second, I wanted to make him feel it, to make him experience even a fraction of the pain they had inflicted on me. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't bring back what they had taken. It wouldn't give me peace. He took another step back, his eyes wide now, like he was finally realizing that I wasn't someone he could brush off. Then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound jolted me, cutting through the fog of my rage. I pulled it out, and a message flashed across the screen. Lauren. I know what you're about to do, and I swear I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry, but you need to understand, I didn't leave you for him. I left because I couldn't be the person you needed me to be. I was lost. Please talk to me one last time. You deserve the truth. You deserve closure. I stared at the words, my thoughts colliding in chaos. My grip tightened around the phone as I read it again, trying to make sense of it. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This was just another excuse. Another lie. Another attempt to twist the narrative, to manipulate me into giving her one more chance. I didn't believe her anymore. I couldn't. Without a second thought, I deleted the message. Then, without looking at the man still standing there, frozen, unsure of what had just happened, I turned and walked away. I didn't care what he thought. I didn't care what she had to say. I climbed into my car, shut the door, and let out a slow breath. And that's when it hit me all over again. I didn't need her. I didn't need him. I didn't need closure.